All right, so welcome to Cisco Implementing Cisco IP Routing course. This is the CCNP route course. We're going to be talking about a lot of wonderful things this week. A lot of topics that I think are extremely interesting. Just in general, just a lot of different topics. But let's talk, let me kind of go through the table of contents for this particular course and just talk about some of the things that we'll be talking about. You guys can be thinking about this as we're going through the class, but and then if you want me to expand, like I said, on any one of these individual sections, I'm more than happy to do that. There's obviously going to be lab exercises. There's a couple of different ways the labs work in this particular class. There are what we call discovery labs, and then there are these labs that are called challenge labs. So I actually have all of the discovery labs built in GNS3, which is a network simulation application. I'm more than happy to share those pre-built discovery labs with you guys. We'll be using those labs as demonstrations, and I'll kind of go through and demonstrate a lot of these different concepts to you guys and go through some of the configurations. And then we have the challenge labs as well, which you guys will have access to. But we're going to start off in module number 1, which is just basic networking and routing concepts. We'll talk about the differentiation between different routing protocols. We'll talk about what are different network technologies like traffic types. IPv6 is a big part of this class. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about IPv6, and I will try to expose you guys to as much about IPv6 as possible. I wouldn't say necessarily that there's a whole lot of IPv6 on the exam, but there's certainly on the troubleshooting test, there are at least 3 different IPv6 tickets. You know, even though you may or may not be using IPv6 in your enterprise, most likely not, it is something that you're definitely going to see in the near future. So we'll talk about in module number 1, lesson number 3, connecting remote locations with the headquarters. And that, you know, a discussion about MPLS and GRE and dynamic multi-point VPN. We'll talk about NHRP, IPsec, and so on. And then we'll get into lesson number 4, which is the last lesson in module number 1, which is implementing RIP next generation. Believe it or not, that's how we start with learning our routing protocols in this class. There's two reasons why that particular exercise or that particular discussion is important. Number 1, the way that we implement a lot of our IGP routing protocols is very similar to what we're doing in RIP. And number 2, RIP as a protocol, well, RIP next generation is IPv6. So in that particular discovery, I'm going to demonstrate a lot of IPv6 concepts, which I think are really important, which will also carry over to a lot of the other discussions and topics that we have related to IPv6 in other protocols as well. So even though it's not necessarily a protocol you would be running in your enterprise, it is certainly a protocol that allows us to introduce some additional concepts that I think would be important. Then we'll get into module number 2, which is EIGRP, the Enhanced Interior Gateway Routing Protocol. We'll talk about how we establish EIGRP neighbor relationships, you know, what's necessary in order for that to happen. Then we'll talk about how the topology table is built in EIGRP. We're going to talk about optimizing EIGRP. So in the CCNA class, you do get a lot of exposure to implementing these protocols, specifically EIGRP, but you don't necessarily get into some of the advanced optimization concepts like query scoping and how to manage the query process in EIGRP, what is a stub router, and so on. We got a discovery in that lab, in that class as well. I mean, that lesson, excuse me. EIGRP stub routing, EIGRP summarization, EIGRP load balancing. So we've got several different discoveries that we'll be doing in that class as well, or in that lesson, excuse me. Then we'll take a look at EIGRP for IPv6. And then we'll wrap up module number 2 by talking about what is an EIGRP named configuration. All right. In module number 3, we're going to focus on OSPF, the Open Shortest Path First Protocol. Again, starting off by talking about how do we establish neighbor relationships in OSPF, Lesson number 2, we'll talk about building the link state database. Very, very important concept. What is the link state database? What are the different types of link state advertisements that exist, and so on? A couple of discoveries related to that. We'll get into optimizing OSPF. You'll find that there's really kind of 2 things that can happen when you're trying to optimize a routing protocol. One of those things is to do special area types or special router types. The other is to do things like summarization. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. Then in lesson number 4, we'll talk about configuring OSPF v3, which is OSPF, which it's a little confusing, right? Because OSPF v3 could mean 2 different things. It could mean something similar to like an EIGRP named configuration, or it could mean specifically OSPF for IPv6. In this particular case, it means implementing OSPF using address families and combining the configuration of IPv4 and IPv6 together in one OSPF configuration. And that'll end up, that'll take care of module number 3. Module number 4, we're going to get into redistribution and why we need it and how we do it. How do we do route filtering with the redistribution process using distribute lists and prefix lists. We'll talk about route maps, route manipulation, manipulating values like administrative distance, doing route tagging. And then in module number 5, we'll talk about path control implementation, Cisco Express forwarding, managing the data plane and the control plane. What are some different Cisco switching mechanisms and so on. That's actually going to be probably a repeat, essentially, of something that you might have covered in the CCNP switch class, where we talk about Cisco Express forwarding and other concepts. Then we're going to get into path control, right? What is policy-based routing? How do I implement policy-based routing? And then we'll wrap up talking about IP SLA. All right? So that's what we're going to be focusing on throughout the course. Those are the things that we're going to be talking about. There is some other aspects as well. We'll get into BGP, the Border Gateway Protocol, and then we'll get into securing network resources and routing resources and so on. So lots and lots of wonderful topics. I think it's a great class, and the way that the course is organized, I think is it's very well done. There's some pluses and minuses to the process, but overall, I think you guys will really enjoy this class and you'll get a lot out of it. All right. As far as what you need to go coming into this class, you're not really required to know a whole lot. The fundamentals. We certainly we do deep dives in all of these topics as part of this class, but I don't necessarily assume that people come into this class not knowing things. I mean, certainly you're going to need to know about things like the OSI model and the general concepts of subnetting and so on, but we do pretty much cover a lot of these different topics from the ground up. And sorry about that. So as I was saying, I will backfill. I don't want to assume that you guys aren't coming into this class not knowing anything, of course, because I know that you guys have years and years of experience in the field, and but also understanding that maybe you might not be as versed as somebody coming fresh off a CCNA might be, and the basic concepts and theory of, say, how an EIGRP query process works, or what is a successor and feasible successor, and so on. So one of the things that I will probably try to do is kind of backfill some of those things as part of our discussion on some of these topics, even though it might not necessarily be specifically covered in that particular section or whatever. So really the main thing to take away from like a CCNA type class is really just all the theory and the basic concepts of networking in general. And then we're going to go ahead and get into a lot of the other concepts as we kind of go through the class here. All right. Obviously, your goal here is to build on whatever you may have taken away from the CCNA routing and switching class, and expand on those foundation knowledge and those topics to implement these technologies in what we call an enterprise type of environment, right? Where you have advanced techniques that you're using to further enhance the way that these protocols are implemented, or to enhance the efficiency or the security or the functionality of these protocols. Overall, you can really kind of break the route class down into about 6 or 7 individual topics, but we do go into quite a bit of detail on each one of these topics as a matter of discussion, right? And really get into the weeds in a lot of these different things. And a lot of this, it's not going to be death by PowerPoint this week. There's a lot of demonstrations that go along with this, and I'll try to demonstrate a lot of these concepts in as much detail as I can, time permitting, of course, and show you guys concepts and theory and whatnot in command line, so you can see this applied as opposed to just kind of reading about it or seeing what it is in the book from a theoretical standpoint, right? So we'll talk about routing protocols. We'll talk about how we connect different networks together. What is the reason why I might choose one routing protocol over the other? What are some of the caveats if I make a decision to choose a particular routing protocol? And so on. Configuring EIGRP for IPv4 and IPv6, OSPF for IPv4 and IPv6. Like I said, we'll talk about route manipulation, route redistribution, policy-based routing, enterprise internet connectivity, which is the BGP aspect, essentially. And then finally, we'll wrap up with securing our routers. How do we implement routing protocol authentication? What are some of the best practices to implementing routing protocol authentication, and so on. All right, so let's take a look at what our daily course flow is here, and we'll try to maintain this schedule as best as possible. One of the things that I always tell my students in my classes is it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So we want to make sure that you're getting the best possible knowledge. It's not just a matter of, well, we need to make it through these 7 modules by day number 5. Now, that being said, we do try to maintain as much as possible the schedule. So on day number 1, we're doing the course introduction right now. We're going to do module number 1, which is just basic networking and routing concepts. We'll talk about that throughout the morning. And then in the afternoon session, we'll start our EIGRP module, which we will then complete tomorrow, day number 2 in the morning, and we'll start module number 3 in the afternoon. Day number 3, we'll finish up module number 3, and then we'll start into module number 4 in the afternoon of day number 3. Day 4, path control implementation, module number 5. We'll take care of that in the morning session, and then on the PM session, we'll start our enterprise internet connectivity, which is essentially BGP. Basically, that's what Module 6 is all about. It's 100% BGP. We'll say 95% BGP. There's a couple of things we'll talk about in there that are not specifically related to BGP. And then we'll finish up day 5 talking about routers and routing protocol hardening. Mostly in this case, we're just simply talking about management plane functions and how to secure the management plane access. And then we'll also talk about securing the control plane functionality by implementing routing protocol authentication and so on. So that's our goal for the week, and that's what we're looking to cover throughout the week. As part of this course, obviously this is a professional level certification, specifically 300-101, which is the Implementing Cisco IP Routing exam. The course is part of a 3-course series, which is T-Shoot, Switch, and Route, 300-135, troubleshooting. which is mostly a hands-on type of exam. It consists of about 13 or 14 different troubleshooting tickets, encompassing both switching and routing in both IPv4 and IPv6. Then we have the switch course as well, 300-115. Very similar to this course, obviously, but basically related to specifically, obviously, switching concepts like spanning tree and VLANs and BTP and DTP and HSRP and so on. And then obviously this course, 300-101, route, which we already talked about the different topics that are included within this course. Keep in mind, guys, if you do decide to go ahead and take this exam, any existing certifications that you might have at the associate level or at the professional level, assuming you take and pass this exam, will be renewed for another 3 years. But if you start the process of getting certified, so let's say you took switch 2 years ago and you now decided to take route, and then you go and decide to take two-shoot later to achieve your CCNP certification, it doesn't extend the ability to achieve that certification for another 3 years. In other words, once you start any certification, you have to complete that certification within a 3-year window. All right. So if you did start, say take your switch exam 2 years ago, you only have a year left, regardless of whatever exams you pass, to complete that CCNP certification. Now, once you've completed it, then after you've completed it, then you're going to have the ability to obviously just simply renew for 3 years. All right. So any questions about that specifically, the renewal process? I don't know if you guys are familiar with that process or not, but if you don't, that's fine. We'll continue on. But yeah.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
CCNP, that's only 3 tests now?
CCNP is only 3 exams. It's been 3 exams for quite some time. I know when I took it originally, it was 4 exams, right? The BCRAN and the BCMSN and CIT, yeah. But it's been 3 exams for quite some time now. Yeah. Now the other thing that's good about this certification is once you take route and switch, then you're eligible to get your CCDP as well by simply taking the ARCH exam. All right. So there is obviously in the associate track, there's CCNA route switch, and then there's CCDA, which is the design associate certification. And then on the professional level, there's CCNP route switch, and then part of the prerequisite to get your CCDP, which is the design professional, is that you have to have your route and switch exams passed. So even if you don't go get your T-shoot, the route and switch still apply towards your CCDP, which is the design professional certification. There is an additional exam you have to take. It's called ARCH, A-R-C-H. But by passing route and switch, you're now qualified to go and take that CCT, or you're then able to go take that CCDP exam. And if you have your CCDA, you'll get your CCDP certification as well. Just keep that in mind later on. If you guys are interested in continuing and maintaining your CCNP, if you go through and complete your CCNP, one of the common things that people will do to renew their professional level certs is to go take their ARCH exam, because then that not only renews their NP, but it also provides them an additional certification. Just something to keep in mind.
You have to take DA to get DP, right?
You do have to take the DA to get the DP. However, if you do take the DA, all right, if you do take the DP, then even though you might not get the certification, it still renews your NP, and then you can then go back and take your DA after the fact. You don't actually have to do them in order. In other words, the result of the exam is still valid for 3 years. So some people tend to do that. They want to maintain their NP. So even though you don't have a DA, the NP class, I mean the NP exam is still valid to renew your NP. The DP exam, it's early in the morning here, guys, sorry. The DP exam is still valid to renew your NP, even though you might not have the DA yet. Does that make sense? I think I finally got that out the way I wanted to. All right. So, yeah, that's where we're at. All right. There's a couple more slides in this introductory deck. It's just, you know, sign-in sheet and stuff like that. So we won't go through that. The sign-in sheet and introductions, we've already done those. All right. So that is the end of the introduction. Now let's go ahead and get into module number 1.